at all the institutions, offering more choice, creating more interdisciplinary programs. It's not just about learning economics and learning public policy. I think it's economics and public policy. It's about learning computer science and entrepreneurship together, interdisciplinary programs, wedded together, like history and economics,
Not like the way when I used to study at IIT, we could take 3 humanities courses.
That's much more interdisciplinary, intertwined education. I think that's better for the 21st century.
What are the 3 things India should do in, let's say, school education? What would your top 3 things be?
So for me, I think the top would be FLN by far. I think number 2 would be FLN and number 3 would be FLN. I think at this stage, it's like location. I think it's the next 5 years, if you ask me. I think just sharp focus and the momentum that we have behind Nipun Bharat, the NEP, we have to achieve learning. This is the most critical. To have half our children almost be left behind, we have to lift the bottom half, basically. And this will then be permanent. These children will have better life outcomes, but it's not only them, but the next the ones that flow through, the next cohort that comes in.
What about higher education?
So I think one is the implementation of this National Research Foundation that was talked about in NEP as an independent sort of body, a research foundation reporting into the Prime Minister effectively. I think we need to prioritize research. We also need a governance model for research where we need to be more bold and ambitious in supporting our higher education institutions so that they can move up from a research standpoint.
Hear a little more about the NRF, the National Research Foundation.
So idea of the NRF was to create a body that would basically fund research across institutions in India with a governance structure which is mostly comprised of leading researchers from the domain and with some areas that the government would prioritize. So I think that's the idea. If we have to catch up, for instance, in AI, government's just announced the quantum mission, but one body that has the right mechanism to allocate, to monitor, to sometimes make sure that their national hub set up. The government is doing some of that, but it becomes the way the US has the NSF and NIH, China has its own National Science Research Foundation. India needs a big one to make that happen.
So that's first, research.
The first one, research. I think a second one is particularly for the leading institutions. I think this focus on interdisciplinarity, which NEP talks about, moving towards, so at all the institutions, offering more choice, creating more interdisciplinary programs. It's not just about learning economics and learning public policy. I think it's economics and public policy. It's about learning computer science and entrepreneurship together, interdisciplinary programs, wedded together, like history and economics,
Not like the way when I used to study at IIT, we could take 3 humanities courses.
That's much more interdisciplinary, intertwined education. I think that's better for the 21st century. And the third, I would say, is for the mass, is really higher standards. So we need to define higher standards in all the professional educations, in engineering, in law, in management, in nursing, all these, really lift the standards, whether it's the accreditation framework, all of that, so that we have most of these are private, low performing, and we really need to lift the bar, the information asymmetry that exists, close that, and make sure that we get much better outcomes.
And that what you're saying primarily happens through accreditation. You define standards and then everybody competes to kind of or strives to get to those standards.
And also for the students and parents to also know which are the A, B, C, D institutions so that market forces can correct for themselves much faster. A little bit of it has happened in engineering, where the worst institutes have had to shut down as there was overcapacity. But I think the market signals could have happened much faster. And in many of these areas, we still keep reading about that 70% of our engineering graduates are not ready,
Yes, job ready.
etc., job ready. I think we have to lift that, the standard, so that, that 70% becomes 20%. I'm not saying it'll go to zero, but it goes down to 20-30%.
So research, interdisciplinary education across all the higher education institutes, and standards that lift the general kind of bar.
And especially, I would say, starting in the professional courses, so that people going to jobs in these courses are fit for employment in those sectors. And honestly, the standards should, to some extent, in those even be informed by industry to some extent. Like law, management, nursing, all of them. Pharmacy.